Good morning. I am Susie Terrell with the La Center Historical Museum. Today is October 19th, 2023. I'm here in this beautiful home with Roberta Emerick, and she is going to tell us a little bit about her life growing up in La Center. And I'd kind of like to maybe start with a little bit of history of your grandpa coming. So we'll get going here in just a minute.
All right.
And Roberta, I want you to feel free to talk about whatever and how much you want to bring in. I am very interested in your time growing up in La Center and your time at the roller rink. That seems really fun to me. But this is your interview, so we can do whatever you want.
You're very gracious. Thank you for coming. Yes, I am enjoying my new home. Just moved in about in April, I believe, and it's been very, very comfortable for me. Well, La Center. When you asked the questions earlier, I did a sheet to try to get kind of acclimated to what you were going to ask me.
Uh-huh.
And I figured that I lived in La Center for 15 years. And that was from 1941 to 1956. In fact, I had my 5th birthday party upstairs in the old hotel lobby. And my mother had invited all the town kids so we could get acquainted. And somehow she had a friendship with Naomi Sheldon. That was Amos had the garage in La Center, and she had a son Tommy, and she had other children too. But Tommy was my age, so we became friends early on, and in the same grade when we went to school. We were known as the town kids, and there were several of us: the Ray Soul and Shirley Regal Thayer. It is now. And she was one of my best friends growing up, and we were in the same grade throughout first grade. And I graduated in 1954 from La Center High School.
So you went pretty much all the way through school.
Definitely. We didn't have kindergarten, so we started out in first grade. And I had a wonderful first grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Burgess. And I think we all remembered her because she just got us on the right foot all the way around. I don't know whether she's the one that inspired me to go on to be a teacher. I don't know. But when I think back at my teachers, I always had a good experience at school. So that was a good thing.
That is, because a teacher can kind of make or break you.
Well, yeah. I can remember one teacher, I think it was the 6th grade, someone had misbehaved in the class. And he liked to use that little swatter thing that he had. But he didn't do it just to the person that committed whatever they did. He had the whole class lined up, and we all got swatted.
Wow.
We were all embarrassed.
Oh, my.
But he was a coach, and that was his thing. And yeah, that's the only time when you ask me, did you ever get in trouble? That's about it. I don't think I did.
And you didn't, but you still got punished.
I did.
Boy.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But times have changed. You had asked where my family was from. My mother was born in La Center, and she was born in 1905. And my dad was born in Lansing, Michigan. And his family came west to work in the woods and find work in Seattle and so forth. He had 3 sisters and 1 brother, and they were not too far away. But my mother was an only child. She lost her sister Dorothy early on, and when they lived in Centralia. So I'm an only child also.
Oh, wow. Now, that's kind of unusual for back then, because it was like they had pretty good-sized families.
Yeah.
To work the farm and help out.
Yeah, well, in some ways it was good. Became very independent.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, the Banzer family, my great-grandfather married Eliza Banzer. Uh, well, there's quite a story in the museum about John Pollock, and
Uh-huh.
I was so glad Tom Wooldridge worked to get that park named after my great-grandfather. That was
Uh-huh.
sweet. And his sons, James, married Laura Smith from Yakul, and that's where, and then my mother's family. Later on, of course, we were in La Center and then to Centralia. But I thought that was interesting because I live close to Amboy and Yakul.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I
How
think
old were you when your parents got the skating rink then?
Well, that's a good question. Probably in the early 40s, about maybe 42 or 43. I'd have to research that to make sure, but I've got all the records and things from the skating rink, which are very interesting. But I'm in the process of sorting. When you move from one place to another, you know how that goes.
Definitely.
So not everything's in order for this interview. But yeah, the skating rink was a highlight of my life, of course, and being an only child, why that was special.
So when they first moved in there, was the rink intact, or did they build that? And it just seems like that would be an exciting thing for a little one at 5 or 6 years old.
Well, it was interesting. When I first saw the old dance hall, is what it was. It was all attached. It was the hotel, confectionery. Well, it was a restaurant, they called it. And then there was 2 other little niches in that attached building. One was a barbershop or beauty shop, I think. Anyway, my first view was that the entire floor was warped and just an unusual sight for me to see. It wasn't a natural floor at all, but all the maple flooring for the dance hall had warped.
Oh, wow.
And so the building really was unusable for anything for quite some time. But then in the about mid-40s, Dad worked in the shipyards when they first moved in there. And he fixed up some of the rooms upstairs for hotel purposes. And Mom ran the cafeteria downstairs. And she had a cook. She did baked the pies and all that stuff. So that's when I-9 was going through.
Oh, okay.
That was a kind of a busy time. At any rate, as things evolved, they built the new highway, number 1, and bypassed La Center and so forth. But yeah, it's hard to get your thoughts together on that when you were so young.
Sure.
To help with this interview. At any rate, it was a good time they figured they should do something with that building, and they were able to come across the sale on roller skating, which include the music, the amplifier, the whole works.
Oh, my.
All the skates and so forth. And so Dad transformed the old beauty shop corner of that building into a skate room. And there was a stage at the end of the hall. We used to like to play on the stage. And that was there for several years until Dad tore it out and expanded the footage out further. So it made a 40 by 90 skating area.
A good size.
And what's interesting is when they laid the floor, they laid it flat and then across, so that it would go with the grain of the skating.
Oh, yeah.
Because maintaining a floor for skating has to be tricky. A lot of people fall down and put dents in it.
Oh, ouch.
But anyway, Dad, he was very good at cleaning the floor and after every session and cleaning the skates, and they look tip-top and ready to roll. Sometimes when you have roller skate or wheels with ball bearings in them, they will break. And I remember one time the ball bearings going all over the
Oh,
floor.
no. Oh, no.
His famous saying, "Clear the floor." Well, they did it.
About how many kids could be out there at one time?
Oh gosh, it was, who knows, 20, 30.
Oh, so yeah,
It was pretty
it could
crowded
be, yeah.
sometimes, but everybody worked at skating.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to have what they call precision skates.
Uh-huh.
Mine were wooden skates with a ball bearings that were encased somehow, so I didn't have the free rolling rollers, so but I could never master the fancy skating. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
Dad had to set me down several times on the bench for playing roller tag.
Oh.
And not a good thing, but I could never master the fancy stuff.
And is that where you met Frank?
No, he was a Green Mountain boy who came to school in La Center. He had his choice of Battleground, La Center, or Woodland. And at that time, the Green Mountain boys were coming down there. And they had a good sports program, too. But he was just kind of short and stocky and didn't pay too much attention to him until his junior year. And then they get this growth spurt, and he looked pretty good after that. But it was one of those things that transpired, over a period of time. And then, yeah, that was a good time for all. And then I went on to college for 2 years before we got married. And he went to Clark College also. So that was kind of neat. And then we got married August 16, 1956. And then he was in the military and Air Force. And then we got stationed in Spokane, where we had our 2 children, Leslie and Curtis. And then he got his orders to go to Guam. So there was nearly 2 years spent in Guam.
And you went, the whole family went. Oh,
yeah.
That's terrific.
So that was an experience, and all military families know what that experience is about.
Okay.
But you come home pretty broke.
And
so we moved on to the place we're on now, and they had a little cabin for the grandparents. And we fixed that up, and we lived in that for 5 years. But then he got on at the Forest Service, and we just couldn't make ends meet. We just stayed there, and he put on another couple editions, and that's where we stayed till he passed. He passed away in June of last year.
Okay. Well, it's beautiful property. I can see wanting to stay here.
Well, this is the place he was born, not too far from the front door. And he knew what the sunsets were like here. So we fashioned the house so that you get a full view of the sunsets. And that's something I've been enjoying since I've been here.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, I'll bet.
And my granddaughter pastures horses down below. So it's just an all-encompassing joy to live here.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I read somewhere that you and Frank like to square dance.
Oh, that
sounds fun.
It was a good time. 10 years of it.
Wow.
And they cleaned up the old log cabin on Salachi Prairie, and we had the timber toppers square dance. And our kids became teen toppers, and it was a good family entertainment for many years. Made many friends. Some of our longest-lasting friends were from the square dancing.
I'll bet. How did you get involved with the La Center Museum? Did you know Margaret Koff at, before your time at the museum, or did she seek you out, or were you a friend of a friend who just got snagged? Because that's kind of the way I got into it.
Oh, yeah. No, Margaret used to stop in at the skating rink. She was very active at the school, and she and my mother struck up a friendship. And I remember her coming in. I had made a candy house for Christmas, and it took her eye, and she says, "Oh, I want to borrow that." And she took it up to school to show off. And so, and I was really young, just a young girl. So I knew Margaret, and Margaret knew Frank since he was born.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So she's a Green Mountain gal too. And when we got involved with not so much the Lasseter Museum, but of course Amboy's
Uh-huh.
North Clark Museum, and we started getting involved in 1988.
Okay.
So we spent a good 25 years before we retired. We retired from the museum in 2013, but we still are active even today in various things, on call, or I do their archive scrapbook.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a special time. And now that the centers developed their museum, I'm anxious to get some of the history that I have about the center and the skating rink and so forth down there.
Yes, and we love it. We thoroughly love it. It's the display that we have now is quite popular. When the school kids come through the
Sure.
tours, they love. They can't imagine going and doing that and having a place to really hang out
Yeah.
like that. And kids need that kind of a spot.
I think so. No, those were special days. I remember Mom and Dad, when they would close, they allowed a half an hour after for a sock hop, and the kids would bring their own music. That was after I left. I was only there until, I got married and left. And then the folks carried on, and I talked to some people that helped them with the rink, and I thought, wow, they had a whole life, but I had a separate life too. But my kids were old enough to one of them to get skates on, Leslie, and Curtis, he was rolled around in a stroller.
Oh, I'll be darned. How fun.
So, it evolved. Then later on, I went to a skating rink up in Olympia, and they were all using inline skates.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was so unusual.
Yeah.
So we graduated from the 4, which you felt secure with, up to inlines.
Oh, so you did get on those? Huh?
No, I did not.
Okay. I was going to say.
I'm an observer when it comes to skating now.
Oh, well, that's fun. Did you, were you still in the area? You've lived here all this time. Did you know about the hot air balloon guy that moved into at least part of that complex where the skating rink was?
Yeah, that sounded interesting. I never went down and looked at it, but another couple bought the skating rink when my folks decided to give it up, you might say. Their health deteriorated. So they found a place in Vancouver to move. And I think I'll share this with you. When Dad came down to La Center, my mother, of course, being born in La Center, she says, I'd like to get back to La Center, So he came down and found this dance hall and so forth in disrepair and so forth. And the cost at the time was $3,000.
Wow, okay. But that was a big deal, right?
It was, evidently. It was quite a bit of, probably an acre there. Anyway, I have Mom's checkbook where she made payments, monthly payments to pay it off because, nobody had big money in those days.
Sure, yeah.
But at any rate, and then when they finally decided to sell, they sold it for $30,000.
Wow.
Just for the books to know. I thought, and they thought that was but they bought a house in Vancouver with that money, and they lived a very comfortable life. It was quite amazing to me in today's way of things.
Right.
I don't know how anybody could buy anything anymore, but we saved for this place, and I'm so glad that we were able to. We made good investments. Even though I was teacher's pay and he was Forest Service, it's kind of, we made it just fine. Yeah.
So tell me about you being a teacher and where you first started.
Well, of course, I started substituting at Green Mountain School.
Oh, okay.
And it was fun for me. I just enjoyed it. Previously, I had a job at the school as a teacher's aide. And that kind of got me wound up. I says, well, why don't I just go ahead and get my degree? I've got 2 years of college behind me, and it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. My kids by then were in like 7th and 8th grade. They were only 13 months apart, so it was, they were buddies, and a lot of things with them was special. Their relationship even now is special.
That's nice.
But then a job came up in Amboy. So from that point on, for 8 years, I taught in Amboy, and then they realigned the schools, and I went to Yakult, and I spent 12 years there. So 20 years in total.
Did you stay teach
Pretty
the same
much.
grade?
Second grade, 1 year in third, and then the rest in second grade.
Okay.
And it was a delightful experience. They still love their teacher at that age.
Yes. I was gonna say something not politically correct, but that they're still little human beings at that point and adorable. And I just don't know how teachers with the older kids can handle things, especially now. Things are kind of crazy at school.
Yeah, it seems like there's all kinds of temptations out there, but when you stop and look at your own family, they do okay.
Yeah.
They do. Somehow they all survive. They grow up to be very nice people.
Right.
Let me put it that
Wonders,
way.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the most part, then it was an enjoyable.
I look forward to it. But since I was an art major, the kids got a good dose of art. But I always considered writing an art, so they had to do their penmanship very well for me.
Yeah, and that's something they don't even teach anymore.
Well, I don't know. I've got great grandchildren now, and they seem to be coming along good. They both go to Green Mountain School, which Frank went to. And actually, his mother and father went to Green Mountain School.
Really?
Too.
Oh my goodness sakes.
So they're carrying on in the tradition. And another note of interest, the Dr. Hoffman in Woodland delivered Claude, Frank's father, and he delivered Frank also.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, he's pretty rooted in this area, I would say.
Yeah.
I was born in Bremerton, Washington, and my folks, of course, didn't move down till the early 40s, and so, but there was similarities because Frank's father worked in the shipyards too, and so everybody basically was involved with the war effort. Yeah.
Well, back to the center, you would have been pretty young, I believe, when our midwife, Maddie Sheldon, was delivering babies. But she was in town for quite a long time and ran the gas station. And were you aware of her? Did you know her?
I can remember the house she lived in, and I must have seen her around because various people were delivered by Maddie, and I certainly knew of her. But my life was pretty much at the hotel drink. My Aunt Martha lived across the bridge in that little old house. Well, Tom Wooldridge built on the property, but there used to be a house below that, and I would walk across the bridge and visit her. She was a step-sister of my mother, or how did that go? At any rate, how they had families in those days, but she was, a step-sister. I'm not sure just how. Okay. I'd have to get out my genealogy.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's something else again.
Now, I remember hearing tell of stories where kids would walk from, say, up in the View area, down across the bridge, down to Woodland to go to a movie, and then back in the same night. And I never I relate that to nowadays kids. And I just can't imagine, number one, the parents allowing all these kids to do that. But so that's didn't sound like something that you had gotten involved with.
Well, no, my trek was to school every day.
Uh-huh.
It was from home to probably close to a mile.
Uh-huh.
My friend Shirley, she was up on the hill, so she had a little further to walk than I did. But the bus would come down the hill. There used to be a triangle out in front where the skating rink was. Just a big, deep trench with a creek running through it. And another road ran up to the center, so it was like a triangle. And that bus would go down that road and go across the bridge and pick up the kids on the other side, but they never picked up the town kids. I
Oh,
always had a grievance about that
yeah.
because we'd get to school, and I remember my mother made me wear these long stockings. They were soaking wet, and my teacher would lay them on the register to dry. There was some fun stuff going on those days, but yeah, I walked to school along with the other town kids for years.
Yeah, that's different that the bus wouldn't even stop to pick you up. That
Well, it just wasn't in their planning.
yeah.
Well, there was a lot of kids in town and it wasn't that big of a walk. But we walked on the wooden planked sidewalks the first few years I went to school until they deteriorated. Then you had to walk on the side of the road coming to and from. But yeah, my dad used to take a bucket and go across the road when we first moved there and pick up horseshoes.
Oh,
And he'd come in with a big bucket full because there was a livery stable across there at one time. And so I learned to be playing horseshoes pretty good. And then, I remember talking about my father. He went down on the riverbank and he would collect clay. There was a gray clay down there and bring it back in buckets, and I would make all kinds of goodies. I still got one of those little clay pots around here somewhere.
oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, there was things you did, that were kind of fun in La Center.
Yeah, I heard that somebody had made a very minor type of a water park right down where the bridge is now in that area, where they had 3 different slides that kids would climb up a pole on and then slide down, and they also had these little cabanas set up on poles that you could go up like to change your clothes, and that it was quite popular even up through like Tacoma. People would come down, and I have yet to see pictures of that. I'm always hoping that someone, has in their shoe boxes full of old snapshots. I'm hoping that I'll run across something like that sometime.
Well, I was going to say some of the older buildings, if you look at the pictures, I could see that happening because the river was pretty and they had some beaches.
Yeah.
There were some people that lived down the river that had lovely homes down there. And the beachfronts, we should walk down to go swimming. I was never a good swimmer, but always went down and enjoyed, everybody. But yeah, there was a great swimming hole. I imagine it was down there in that area, though, not up close to town.
Yeah, I think it was Bill Barnhart who was interviewed one
Bill
time.
would know,
And he's the one that brought it up. And I'd like to.
Bill's was a good resource for you. Yeah.
So, do you have any funny or maybe even scary stories that you remember that happened in and around town?
Probably lots of funny ones. No real scary that I can think of. I remember when the big fire up in the hills, and the smoke and everything came right through the center. I remember that.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of tragic things going on at that time. And I'm not just sure what year that was, but it had to be in the 40s because I was there.
Right, yeah.
So I have kind of a fear of forest fires, of course.
Right.
We
Yeah.
had some close calls here lately. I think it was last year that we
Yeah.
had
Last
one up
summer
in
we had.
Amboy.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about. That would be the scary things of the weather.
Things like the Columbus Day storm.
That was a good one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the old house with the two kids, and Frank was up in the hills because he was Forest Service. When the storm hit, he was up in the hills, and they had to retreat to a clear cut, and they could hear crashing and everything all
Wow.
around them. And when the wind subsided, then they had to come out, and they had what they called toad goats. They were little machines, with wheels that, like a motorcycle. They'd lift them up and over the logs, and finally they got out, but they didn't get out till late. And I remember Frank's father coming over, and I was sitting in the living room, and the roof was squeaking because the nails were being pulled up from the wind.
Wow.
It was frightening. And I saw one tree in the corner of the house take off like an umbrella across the lawn. Well, anyway, he put a kid under each arm, and we headed for his house. And it wasn't much better. His roof squeaked the same way, but it subsided finally. And Dad finally got home. But boy, that was one of probably the most terrific storm I've ever been in. We were in a storm on Guam where we had to evacuate to the Nimitz Hill in concrete bunker type things while the palm trees swayed. But our Quonset that we were living in was tied down with cable and big blocks of concrete. So the house we came back to, even though the wind and rain had come through the house, because there's no windows, there's just screens on your windows. It didn't really bother the house any. So, but we did have to evacuate, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Sure.
So the weather is kind of a thing for me.
Oh, definitely. And you are surrounded by a gorgeous forest out there.
Well, yeah.
So.
I've seen those trees flattened out sideways when the wind flows through Cedar Creek. It seems like a natural trough down through here. So I'm expecting some interesting weather as we go through life.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring something around to have you maybe explain a little bit about. So tell us about these little figurines and trinkets. Yes, they're great.
Well, my mother started crocheting a rope to put these items on it from the bubblegum machine that was in the skating rink confectionery. And she started early on, and she'd attached them to the shelves where they sold the candy. And when the kids would get something, they were something of, interest, but they didn't want to keep them, so they'd give them to her, and pretty soon this started to grow and grow and grow. And I suspect close to 23 years accumulation there.
Wow.
Because kids really enjoyed seeing the rope grow, but they also enjoyed seeing their little trinkets up there. So they bring in their own little things to put on there. That was kind of sweet. My son even remembered that when I said about it, and he was pretty young. So I'm glad to give it to the museum.
Well, we're
kind of a labor
really
of love.
Excited to be able to show it off and have the story to tell about it.
Yeah.
So there's so many different variations here. It looks like little harmonicas.
Yeah.
And horses and trains
have fun playing I Spy. I did that with my grandkids, and they enjoyed it. So, I have yet to count them. I don't know how many are on there. Yeah. So that's your chore.
Well, maybe that will be a contest to see.
I think you need to follow through with that.
That would be fun.
But enjoy, yes.
Yeah, and we thoroughly appreciate you donating this.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Well, if you can think of more things that we can chat about, I'm at your disposal here. I think I've gotten most of my, oh, I know. I wanted to ask you. And I don't know.
Excuse me for a minute.
Sure.
I've got some notes over here. I'll run over here and see if I forgot anything. I think we put pretty much of everything in this interview. Go ahead. Oh, the collection of name cards. I've got those for you. And by the way, I have a copy of the Gola picture of the center that he did in watercolors on display in the bedroom in there. And Tom Wooldridge made a copy for me.
Oh, nice.
And I cherish it because my great-grandfather's house is in the corner.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I don't have my timeline just perfect here, is were you and Frank involved with the Amboy Museum back when they were doing the remodel and taking down all the panels of wood and redoing that?
Oh, I think so.
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought so.
The whole concept of the museum started in 1988.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't open the doors until 2000.
Oh.
And that's kind of a shock to some people. It
is,
took 12 years? Well, yes, the building was in total disrepair.
I
So
don't
it was
know
a
this part of the
complete
history.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Frank, he was the building chairman at the time. And I did the coordination, and all the volunteers, everybody pitched in town even. I mean, when we were working on it, people would stop their cars and jump out and come in. Anything I can do.
Really?
It was amazing. It was an amazing time in Amboy's history. And we have a video of it. I think I gave it to your museum.
That's great, because it's so hard to get people to volunteer these days. And so I was going to ask what your secret was for being able to get the whole town involved.
Well, for me, there was one woman, Barbara Wagner, who spearheaded this. And she was adamant about having a museum. And we looked at a lot of buildings, even the Tum Tum Log Cabin up there for a possibility. And this property, who was a family was living in it at the time, she negotiated to buy that old church and put up the money for it. And the people said, we can't move out because we don't have any place else to go. And so she found a house in Yakult for them to move into.
Oh my goodness.
These are fun stories. Anyway, she financed the whole thing, and we carried the loan through her, and we got an interest-free loan through, the buying part through her, but we got an interest-free loan from the PUD.
Oh.
So we were surveying all kinds of ways to get money, and that really helped a lot. And eventually we were able to pay off the entire thing. It was great.
Wow.
It was really a good experience. But we bought into that early on. Frank's uncle had worked on the church roof, putting the roof on when it was a church.
Oh, I'll be darned.
And so we had a family tie-in there. And he fell off and broke his leg, by the way.
Oh, my. Oh.
So I had kind of a fear of this happening there, but luckily I don't think anybody really had any serious injuries. We had the one incident where the insurance agent came by, and he went on the back porch, which was in total disrepair, and he fell through the porch.
Oh, dear. Oh, my.
So there were some incidents. I could go on, but I'd have to think about that one too. But it was a joy to do that. And Frank, we had both retired. Well, he retired early on, and then I retired in 1973. So he actually was involved with the museum pretty much full time after retirement.
Oh, okay.
And then when I retired, I jumped in because I would help him,
How did you first accumulate things to put inside. Did once the building was getting close to being ready, did people in the community have things that they wanted to donate? And
That gets interesting when you stop, because our building wasn't, we used that building to have some garage sales, basement sales, and so forth. And we had a makeshift museum-ish decor in there for a while. But when the serious stuff started, everything had to leave. And we had the old organ that was given to us stored in someone's house. We had an airplane hangar full of stuff that we had where it was loose materials that needed to be stored. And it was just, and I think, I had started the archiving project way early on, and I had all that in my house. So I basically housed the, paper materials there. But everybody pitched in and had something, to get out of the building.
Right.
It was quite a core group in the beginning.
Yeah. That's great. I know with our Le Center Museum, Tom Wooldridge was so, such a major contributor,
Totally,
so without Tom, it's been a little here and a little there that come in, and it's hard to I love to rearrange, but it's the same stuff that we just kind of move around to freshen up, but every now and then we'll get in enough of items, to make it a real display. And we have I call him a kid, and I shouldn't do that. He's like 28 years old. But I think anybody like under 30 who is interested in history, and especially like he focuses on Le Center items. That's all he does.
That's cool.
And he does postcards and old cabinet photos and buttons and all kinds of things like that. But it's all Le Center, and he pays a lot of money for these, at auction and stuff. And so again, anybody under 30 that is interested like that, I just dearly love, because sometimes it's hard to get anybody interested in the old stuff.
What pleases me right now is that one of my former students is the president of the North Clark Museum now. So that's rewarding for me to see her taking. But over the years, we've had a myriad of people come in and go, and some of them pass on. I think when Margaret passed, that was one of our greatest, saddest times.
Right.
Because she did so much for museums all across Gristmill, the whole business, but she was vital. But on the selfish side, the Emericks had so much stuff that we were able to donate a whale of a lot of stuff and get it out of our house and the barns and all. And so after a while, people caught on like, oh, we can, give it to the museum. And it's worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
So we got some nice items in there. And first, right off the bat, we got things filled up pretty good. Yeah.
Well, it's a wonderful museum. I love going through, and always wondered who did the little people, the stuffed people that are there. That was such a clever and unique, thing to do. And they fit right in.
I love those two. Well, her name is Marie Downing. She used to be a Sutton. And we used to put floats in all of the Amboy Territorial Day parades. So there weren't enough people, like you say, you've got only a core group to ride the float. I mean, we just didn't have them. So she decided to make some mannequins. And we had those on the floats. And then as things moved on, they moved in. When we got the museum done, she had about 6 or 7 mannequins, but we had used them to promote the museum in the parades.
Well, what an idea, because I know that the idea has come up a time or two of the museum having a float in our day's parade.
Sure.
And again, there's not enough of us, and those that are there are also involved in like the Lions or other organizations, and so they're already marching in that.
Yeah.
And so the idea of mannequins, see, we have one mannequin that is our mascot. He was Ken Viles. Well, actually, it was Myrna donated her father's World War I uniform, and Ken had bought a mannequin for it to go on. And so they donated that to the museum. And after Veterans Day, I thought, well, I don't want to just put him away in a closet,
Right.
you know. Well, I got the bright idea to turn him into a lumberjack. And so we had a real lumberjack that outfitted him, including the spiked shoes. Now, this mannequin was not flexible at all, so getting those shoes on him was a real struggle. I wish that I had have had a video of us doing that, but he's kind of front and center when you first walk in, and he startles people, but they all recognize who Jack is now.
Good.
And we have taken him to different Our Days functions and stuff like that, but I never thought of putting him in a float.
Oh, that's what's fun, is making it. Get somebody with a little trailer, and it works out fine.
That's an idea.
We have our lumberjack, and it happens to be a replica of Marie's husband, Kenny.
Wow.
So she used his hat, because he worked in the woods for years. So we've got his boots, and we've got his hat, and his shirt, and his suspenders, and but he's flexible. He sits in a chair.
See, Jack doesn't sit.
Yeah, we're lucky
He'd have
that
to
way.
be, standing the whole time. Well, that's a fun idea. I'll have to keep that one in mind.
Yeah. Well, she was very talented in many things that she made for the museum, along with other talented folks. It really adds a lot to the whole thing. And we've been very fortunate. And I'm tickled pink that what's going on up there now, because they're carrying on with everything that we had started and worked for. So that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. There's so many times that we get people that finally come through, and we ask them, is this your first time? They said, yeah. And then they mention, oh yeah, we've lived in the center for 30 or 40 years. It's like, okay, we try to get the word out with all the school groups. There's been times when we've had over 230 kids come through in one day.
That's a lot of kids.
They, it's been staggered,
we did that too.
And, but, we love having them come through, and they do get excited over the roller skating rink display. And it's funny what strikes some, their interest, and others they could care less. But we like to get them young to get them interested in their history.
I'm so glad you're doing that. That's a good step in the right direction, to get them younger to appreciate history, what's come before them.
Yeah.
And I always felt good about that too.
So, and the hope is that they will go home, tell mom and dad about it, and sisters and brothers, and they'll want to come back and visit. So
they will.
That's what draws them in. Well, Roberta, if you don't have anything more, we can always do this again and add to, but it's been a real pleasure for me to meet you and come out and get some of my questions answered and learn a whole bunch more that I didn't know about. So
I didn't even cover all my notes, but I'm going to set those aside. We could be here all day if I...
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and I thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well,